Well, welcome to this year's Night in the Light event. And this presentation was offered back on March 21st, 2024. Two years ago, I stood at this vantage point watching kids in the after-school program, like I normally do. And a car pulled up there on Dunlap Circle, which is in front of us. And once the car stopped, the driver got out. I didn't recognize him at first, but as he came closer, I did realize that he was Anthony Greene. Anthony Greene is a young man that we've known for many, many years, since 2005. He basically grew up at the ministry, and over those many years, we developed a relationship with him. He was baptized over at Spring Hill Baptist Church back in 2010. But he was kind of a character. In fact, in all honesty, he and I didn't always get along too well. Not just he and I, but many of the staff. From Dolores and some of the other LOV team, he was quite the character. And so it was always kind of a rough relationship we had over those years. However, he was incarcerated, and he was incarcerated for about 7 years inside a federal penitentiary in Texas. And over those years, he and I actually developed a relationship. He would call, in most cases, asking for money on his books, but the conversation was always more than that. We were able to talk about his faith, about his Christian walk while in prison, and because he was not all drugged up all the time, we actually had some pretty deep conversations. He was very capable of having a very intellectual conversation, and it was really kind of a blessing that we had this pause in our relationship in the sense that we could have these deep conversations on the phone. Which leads us to this day 2 years ago. He came, and even though he was out, that was the first day, he was back in Mobile, and he wanted to come by Light of the Village and let us all know that he was out. And that was actually very pleasant. It was kind of interesting, though, because he, on Mother's Day of that year, in May of 2022, he came in really fast, and he was carrying a Walmart bag. He ran into the restroom, and he motioned for me to follow him in. And he said, "Hey, I need you. I need you." I wasn't real sure what was in that Walmart bag, actually. I mean, you can imagine the different things that could be in the Walmart bag. I definitely knew it was not his tithe or anything like that as far as a donation. But I did. I followed him in. He closed the door and then took the bag, and I realized that he had been shot in his right arm. And so I said, "Well, hey, man, we need to go take you to the hospital." No, can't go to the hospital. I said, "Well, he wants to call an ambulance." Nope. He just take care of it. Okay, now I know from my experience, in fact, we've dealt once before with Anthony back in the day when he came through the basketball court. He had been shot like in his groin area. It's very common for people not to want to go to the hospital or call the ambulance like most people would do. And so I realized that if I did call 911 that he would just run. And I said, okay. So I got some supplies out of the kitchen, and we had been trained on how to treat gunshot wounds, actually, and so it was fine. And as I was treating his gunshot wound, I realized this was a great witnessing opportunity. And so I started talking to him about, his life and, what led to this point where we are on Mother's Day and dealing with this gunshot wound in his arm. And as I said that, I said, "Anthony, this is your 4th time getting shot. When are you going to get the hint?" And he looked at me funny, and before I knew it, with his left hand, he undid his belt and dropped his pants. And mind you, there are no underpants involved here, so he is completely naked from the waist down. And he says, Mr. John, I've been shot. This is my 6th time getting shot. And he starts to show me entrance and exit wounds throughout his waist and below of how many times he's been shot. And, once again, it just proved my point. I said, well, Anthony, dude, you got to slow down. So we treated the wound. He got a plate of food and left. And interestingly enough, he was self-medicating, it appears. And so later that day, he did pass out in Gulf Village. The ambulance did pick him up. He was treated and released. Well, when he came back another day in May, he walked over to our memorial wall. And this is our picture of our memorial wall. And he looked at an empty spot on the top, and he just was pointing at it and said, that's where I want you to put my picture. And I was in there with Decino, and Decino and I both kind of looked at each other, and we looked at him, and we said, what? What are you talking about? He says, no, that's where I want my picture to go. And of course, I said something like, well, that's going to be like 40 years from now, right? And he never answered. And he said, you know what? I want to help clean the van. Now, that was a strange request as well, but not as strange as I want my picture to go here on the memorial wall. So I said, you want to clean the van? He goes, yeah, I want to clean the van. So we went and got the vacuum cleaner, and sure enough, he went out there and started cleaning the van. And it was interesting because I could tell he was nervous. And as cars would drive by on Baldwin Drive, he would always stop and look real intently as to who the car was. I also realized while he was cleaning the van that he was carrying a Glock pistol, which is what he normally carried. This once again is not uncommon where we are. I know it's pretty uncommon in most places, but where we are, that's pretty normal. And he was just very, very antsy. And before he left, he says, hey, let's take a picture. And we took this picture, and he said, hey, can you walk me over to Gulf Village where I'm staying? And I realized he wanted me to walk him over because that would provide a level of security. He was obviously on a heightened state of alert, and he knew, and I knew and know that if I'm walking with him, chances are he'd be a little safer than if he was just walking by himself. So I decided to do that. And as we walked, we talked like normal, just had a good conversation. Again, always talked about God and heaven and is he going to heaven? And I tried to approach that topic in every way that I could. And again, he would answer all the questions satisfactorily as far as a believer's standpoint. And then I would talk about other things. What's your favorite food? What are you going to eat tonight? And we just had a really honest conversation as I walked him back over to Gulf Village. Now, little did I know that would be the last picture I would ever take with him. A few weeks later on a Saturday morning, this headline came across the news. Officers responding to Arthur Street near Lincoln Avenue around 11:25 a.m. on a Saturday morning, a report of a body lying in the street found a black man dead of a gunshot wound to the face. And that was him. Really sadly is there was a picture posted on Facebook of his body in the road before anybody had gotten there, almost as if someone wanted to prove a point and post it on Facebook of what he looked like. Of course, I'm not going to show that picture, but just know that everybody saw it before the EMS got there. And that was, it never gets easy. We've got 63 people on the wall now, but this, they're all difficult. And they asked me, could you do the eulogy at his funeral? And of course, I said, oh, yes. Yeah, of course I can. And as I thought about it and I reflected on what I would say at Anthony's funeral, an image came to me. I found this on the internet, and the little lost lamb that, of course, Christ talks about for some reason, I thought that would be the most fitting story to tell of the lamb, and how Jesus just chases that lamb. And, and, and I was reminded that although we work and we serve the great shepherd, that is Christ, we chase a lot of lost lambs. And unfortunately, our pasture, our fields that we operate in are extremely dangerous. There's a lot of steep cliffs. There's a lot of sharp rocks. I mean, it's just where we are. And I just thought that story of the lost lamb was extremely fitting. And the funeral was done. And just only a handful of people came, but it was as beautiful as a funeral can be. And going back to that memorial wall, we put his picture exactly where it wanted to go. And yeah, it's a very sad event for sure, but he's not the last. I mean, after Anthony, we had multiple people that we've lost just over the many months since then. And each one of them, their own story, their own relationship with us at the ministry, and most importantly, their relationship with Christ, if we knew of one. You know, in other words, if we had that discussion. And we always try to have that discussion. And you know, when people hear these stories, you know, they ask us, you know, why in the world are you there? Well, actually, the world has nothing to do with it. It's our calling, and it's what God wants us to do. And we totally believe that, or we wouldn't be doing this for sure. But it's where God has called us to be, and we know that God is the way. People ask us, you know, how long has Light of the Village been around? And I always say, well, it started 2,000 years ago. And my point with that is that's, of course, after Christ died, was resurrected, and before he ascended, he commanded us to go and make, you know, disciples of all nations. And the Great Commission, many people call it. And yeah, that's why we do what we do. You know, Light of the Village is a Christ-centered ministry, not faith-based, not socially centered. No, Christ-centered. Just by way of history, Dolores grew up in the Tortugas Pueblo, which is in Las Cruces, New Mexico. She was the youngest of 7 siblings of a very large Hispanic Roman Catholic family. And again, the church was right across the street. She went to Our Lady of Guadalupe Roman Catholic Church. And again, as a pueblo, it had a lot of Indian tradition, and her parents, her family, it wasn't just going to mass, you know, once a week. They were pretty much at the church almost every day, you know, in different, you know, ways, whether it be the altar society or these, you know, working with the Indian tribe or something. They were very, very much involved. And that's where she learned her service. She knew she wanted to be a special ed teacher from a young age, and that was her career. By contrast, I grew up in a single parent home. Actually, my brother and I grew up with my dad, which was pretty rare. Sadly, my brother was killed in 1985, and I made some poor choices in middle school, so I was sent to a military school in Roswell, New Mexico. And actually, God used that, the best thing that could have happened to me. I found my faith there. I found my balance there. I found the person I was supposed to be at that military school inside that environment. And of course, it was the 80s, so it was quite the experience, I can tell you. Yeah, it was pretty wild. But Again, for me, it was perfect. And for a lot of us, actually, it was a great experience. There 6 years. When I got out, I was commissioned as an Army officer and did my requirement there for the Army. Went and got my bachelor's degree and was working on my MBA when Dolores and I met each other and connected, started dating. This is Dolores' favorite picture of us. This is the day she found out she could not have children. She was very young. She was only 19 or 20, and she had severe endometriosis. And anyway, her mother, my mother-in-law, before she was my mother-in-law, she told me I could leave. It was I can leave now if I want to, because Dolores couldn't have kids. But of course, that didn't happen. I was in love with Dolores, and so that's when Dolores knew that we were meant to be. So, of course, we were married in 1994. And as mentioned, we had two career paths. Dolores was a special ed and elementary ed teacher. And after getting my master's in business, I got a master's in healthcare administration because I wanted to be a hospital administrator. And sure enough, I was. For 10 years, I worked at the infirmary health system in Mobile, Alabama, working as a rural hospital CEO and nursing home administrator. And yeah, both of us enjoyed our careers very much. However, as sometimes happens, God had a different plan. And He planted the seeds in us back in San Antonio when I was working on my master's in healthcare administration. We linked up with a little inner city church. I heard them on the radio, and we called them up, and sure enough, they invited us to come. And it was called Victory Gospel Chapel, and it was in San Antonio. That's Pastor Donnie Banks, and then his wife. They called her Mama Jackie, and that's their little church, little red and white church. And it's funny because it was their house, and they opened it up for people to come off the street and live there. And it was a deliverance type ministry. So people with drug addictions, both the pastor and his wife had both been addicted to either crack or heroin. Anyway, that was their calling, was to bring in adults and get them off, or what they would call delivered from those addictions. And it was just something we've never seen before. Just their level of sacrifice and service was just pretty impressive. Dolores would work with some of the guys in the home and help them to read. And some of the other guys kind of took me under their wing, and we would go, this is us going on what we called a midnight witnessing run. We would take hot dogs, and we would go to some of the drug corners and hand out hot dogs and pray with drug dealers and drug addicts, prostitutes, and that type of thing. Yeah, a great experience for us, and we didn't know it, but God was preparing us for the future. There's Dolores and I in the Sutton homes. They're no longer there, but it was a housing project there off of Interstate 35 in San Antonio. And yeah, that's where we did after school program volunteering. There's Dolores with her class, me with my class. And again, we were learning the basics of what God would call us to later. Of course, we really wanted to do prison ministry, or I should say I really wanted to. And so finally we got qualified to go inside prisons and do ministry. And at this point, we've done like 25 different facilities, adults, juveniles, both in New Mexico, Texas, and Alabama. And yeah, we've done a lot of prison in prison ministry that we really thought that was what we were supposed to do. And it worked well with our career paths. However, that was not God's plan. But working with inmates gave us again another foundational base with how to connect. Not for us to connect with inmates, but for us to, again, reflect the faith, love, and hope of Christ to inmates. And yeah, just extremely valuable lessons we learned through that prison ministry experience. It lasted about 10 years. But then we heard this video of an inmate. It was kind of a scared straight video that the district attorney of Mobile County put together because there was, a big spike in juvenile crime back in the mid 90s. And so he did this scared straight video and we heard it, and that changed our direction. This inmate here, his name is Michael Duran, and he's in the Holman maximum security prison in Atmore.
Nothing is worth coming here. Nothing. There's nothing in this world worth coming here. A child shouldn't have to build itself up. If a child got to build himself up by himself, he's going to do something wrong every time. My crime wasn't about taking money. I just wanted to hurt somebody as much as I was hurting. I wish to God that I would have had you then. Man, if I would have had you then, I wouldn't be here now. It's too late. What was someone like you at then? When I needed you. Beat up for somebody. Just take time out, man. Go out there in the projects. Look, you'll find me every day. Every day you'll find me. I'm hurting by the millions out there. So all you got to do is just listen to me. Because I love you doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean a thing unless you can show it. That's the only thing it means. Show me that you care.
So yeah, after seeing that and hearing it, a couple of key points really spoke to us. Where were you? And I thought that was interesting how it's singular. Where were you? And again, we felt like he was speaking to us. Be there for somebody. Go out in the projects and you'll find me every day. And then don't just tell me, but show me that you care. And that's where it gets involved, let's call it. Okay, it's easy to say something. It's a whole other thing to prove it. And that's where it gets, like I say, involved. And so that's very, very key points that drove us from prisons into making a permanent presence inside a neighborhood. So we started looking for a neighborhood where we could, set up like an operating base, for lack of a better term. Both Pastor Donnie, and now he's called Bishop Donnie Banks, and his wife, Mama Jackie, came out from San Antonio to help us look around Mobile and find the right spot. And sure enough, Alabama Village was the perfect spot. That's our street back in the day when we found it. That's Baldwin Drive. And 333 Baldwin Drive is down there where the truck is. And this was the house that we were able to get clean title to. The gentleman was willing to sell it. It was like $7,500, and it was an active crack house. Crack and drugs were sold from that house. People would do drugs in that house, and prostitutes worked out of the back bedrooms in that house. So it took us a while to keep it boarded up and kind of run all of that out of there. But you know what? In a way, we didn't do it. God did it. And something that really hit me back in the day is in a neighborhood like Alabama Village, you see trash and you see this pathway here. But if you look closely and a little bit closer, in the middle of all that, there can be a blossom, a blooming blossom. And that's kind of how I look at the ministry and different aspects of it. And then God does the rest. We just kind of have to be there, and He takes over. So that's what our building looked like, 333 Baldwin Drive. Again, a crack house, but it wasn't a crack house for long because God made it His house. And the neighborhood calls it God's house and our home. We started with summer Bible camps. Most people relate to these because Vacation Bible School, but ours goes on for 6 weeks. This was our very first one at what we call Camp LOV, which is at our main location there in Alabama Village. And this was in 2003. And then by 2010, it had really grown. And we decided at that point to start splitting them into smaller camps so we could keep that quality up. So this is Camp LOV. Again, started back in 2003. This is what it looked like recently. And this is what we call Camp Peace. This is a Parks and Rec building, the Figure Center, which is in Tolmanville, which is actually in Mobile, Alabama, just not very far from us. And we established that in 2019 when they invited us to come and start a summer camp there. And of course, both of these parlay into after-school programs also. Something else we did a couple of years ago is, again, you got your big groups, you play, and you get volunteers from Mission Fuge that come in. But once again, we're Christ-centered. And so everything we do, whether it be summer camp, after school program, it has a Bible study component to it. And that's what we do, no matter where our camp is located. And it was kind of neat because a couple of years ago, the Parks and Recs offered us the ability to have what we call the traveling summer team. And this is where Morgan gets a group of interns and some team leaders, and they actually go to 5 different locations every week for 6 weeks just to do a Bible study. So we estimate, at least 300 and probably a whole lot more kids who participate in those programs get to hear a Bible lesson throughout the summer. Another component that we have, of course, is our Sunday morning breakfast and Bible study. Miss Betty and Tasha are in there cooking breakfast. And yeah, we do offer breakfast. And by the way, everything we do is free. We don't ever charge for anything. We know that God's love is free, although it cost Him His life. We've always felt like, we want to offer everything. Summer camps, after school programs, everything is done for free. This is just a picture from way back in the day, from about 2005, with our first Sunday morning Bible study. And this is what it looked like in this last week. And that's the whole group. And the kids, the little children, are over there on the side. They actually leave. Once we have the big group, the little kids go into their own room. The way we do the Bible studies is pretty simple. We go verse by verse by verse, and we want people to become comfortable with reading the Bible. We don't even give them page numbers. When we say turn to John 14:1, we help them find it just so they can become comfortable with getting into the Bible themselves. And just that one-on-one relationship that we want each person to develop with Christ is, I mean, that's why we're there. Our after-school programs are fairly similar. It's kind of funny. Back in 2004, when we started in 2003, 2004, we had our first after-school program, and we had about 3 schools, maybe 15 students. But today, that's really grown to 9 schools and at least 75 students. And yeah, I mean, just an amazing growth. And that's so important that we grew slowly so we keep that quality level high. So what that requires us to do is to use our vans. We pick the kids up at school and bring them to the program and take most of them home at the end of the day. Same thing with summer camp, by the way. We pick them up and bring them home. There's a few that get picked up and dropped off by a family, but for the most part, we use our vans. And if you've never driven a van, you need to maybe try it once or twice because it is a pretty interesting experience. This is what Elizabeth looks like driving a van. I mean, it can be quite the opportunity to endure. And this is what kids look like when you turn on a country music station. They're not too keen on it. But I show these pictures because at the same time, yes, we deal with a lot of tragedy. We deal with a lot of violence. But we also have a good time. And it's so important for these kids to be able to be kids. And we laugh and we have, humorous moments. So that's always something to remember. And yeah, after school program is perfect. We get to allow kids the opportunity to be kids, even if it's just for a couple of hours. That's crucial. And as I already mentioned, it's always coupled with a Bible study. And to introduce, if they don't know Christ, really encourage and introduce that relationship and let them open their heart, but also to develop it once they have it. A big blossom that has taken place recently is Kristen Jordan. Now, she's volunteered with us for years as a volunteer, but she was a math teacher, a high school math teacher in the public schools for over 12 years. Well, in this last year, she felt God calling her to resign that position and just start working with kids in school and after school and to develop a really strong tutoring program. And that's what she's done. And believe it or not, the kids love it. We've tried it before. Kids don't really want to be tutored or all that. But since Kristen started it, they love it. And they'll come for 20 minutes at a time. We provide and offer it to as many volunteers who just want to come and read with kids. And it's just an amazing blossom, for lack of a better word, that has happened this year. And also, as mentioned, the 2 big schools that we're working inside at this point that have opened their doors to us are Viger High School, where the majority of our high school students go, and Whitley Elementary, where the majority, I don't know, almost the majority of Camp LOV kids for sure go to. And they have opened it. We're able to go in there and tutor kids during the school day. And it's just fantastic. It's a great relationship that we have with those 2 schools. Community lunch is primarily to work with adults, to offer something for adults on Thursdays. Again, it's a free lunch. Churches will volunteer to come and serve a lunch, that Thursday a month. Let's say a lot of churches alternate. And yeah, it's great. Again, it allows people to come and not just get a meal, but to have a moment for kinship to develop, for a true community to develop, and where we can talk to them, they can talk to each other, and so forth. Another blossom that's happened in these last 2 years is what we call Ladies' Night. And once again, we've tried it before and it never really took off, but here lately it's been consistent. Anywhere from 20 to 30 women come on Thursday night for this Bible study. Once again, they come and just kind of hang out and visit with each other and hopefully, foster that kinship. They get a meal, a nice home cooked meal that Betty makes. Child care is provided. So many of them have kids. They're single moms, but we provide child care. Once again, it's free. So their kids are taken care of so they can really not have to worry about their children, but to just for those 2 hours study the Word. And this really uses what we call the lighthouse, which is that house used to be a trailer owned by Mr. Twiley before he moved. And so we offer it in that home style environment. So it's much more casual, much more friendly. And that's where Dolores does it. We also have, again, one-on-one ministry that's very important. Morgan does that. It's almost like case management. She does a lot of coordinating with some of the adults and some teenagers too when they're wanting to get into school and do their different paperwork, applications. But especially like some of the adults where the homeless people that come and they need help getting their driver's license, social security card, benefits. That takes a lot of time, and she works with them on that. And once again, there's her face, which is pretty funny because adults can be quite dynamic, shall we say. But just to spend time with them and let them feel that someone listens to them and works with them is just key. And that's that one-on-one ministry. A component of that also that I've never really talked much about. You remember Victory Gospel that we talked about in San Antonio, the red and white church, what they called it back in the 90s. Well, that's grown into this huge complex that can house almost 100 people. And we have sent, if there's an adult that wants to go to get off of drugs and so forth, we'll give them a one-way bus ticket. And this is a picture of the guys a week ago. We've sent women too, but right now there's only men there from Alabama that we've sent. But this is who they are. So you see that group, and many of them will stay in San Antonio. They don't want to come back to Pritchard or Mobile. And again, if God opens the door, that ministry out there is pretty involved, and they help them get jobs and houses and all that. So it's just an amazing component of what we're able to offer. Another big blossom is teen night. As youth violence has been in the headlines recently, it's pretty amazing that our teen night is so well, participated in by so many different teenagers. But once again, it's funny, it started as an act of violence. There were two guys that we knew, both are on our wall. They killed each other across the street. on January 28th. That was a Tuesday, and it was right before after school program. It happened about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Here's a news piece about that.
Alan, you're hearing that the victims knew each other.
There are about 40 shell casings.
Pritchard police are on the scene of a shooting in broad daylight.
And so, yeah, the victims did know each other. In fact, they were known to play basketball with each other. I mean, up until 2 days before this event. And yeah, 40 shell casings. Yeah, and that's not uncommon. Currently, right now, we've seen a huge shift from handguns to rifles. And if they do have a handgun, like you saw, like little Ant, they've equipped them with what they call a Glock switch, which makes it an automatic weapon. In other words, one pull of the trigger and that whole magazine will empty pretty quickly. And so to have 40 shell casings is not uncommon at all. Well, anyway, but back to that event, we always did the candlelight vigil. But when we were going to do the candlelight vigil, remember that happened on a Tuesday. On the Wednesday night, we were going to do it, but it was raining outside. So we decided to bring it inside the building. And there were a lot of teenagers there because, again, these were two guys who knew each other. Everybody kind of knew them. And so we had a candlelight vigil inside. Well, little did we know, a week later, a lot of those teenagers came back. And they wanted to continue having like a little teen ministry. And that's how it started. And today, way back then, it wasn't that many. In 2016, we had 2 schools represented, maybe 15 students. However, today it's a whole lot more. You'll see 9 schools represented and an average of 50 students come to this, this youth night, teen night, we call it. It's amazing. And again, Bible study, they have fun, they have a nice meal, but we really do a pretty in-depth Bible study and they enjoy it. And so it's just a real blessing that God opened it up. Again, started out with a double homicide right across the street. And this is what it looks like when we have the big group. A lot of times we keep them in smaller groups, but once a month we bring them into what we call large group Bible study. The other times they have, again, in their smaller groups, we have 4 different groups. They're separated by age and gender, and they have their own little smaller group Bible studies. But once a month we bring them all in there together. Also, as part of the teen ministry, we have a candle. We have the candle factory that we started years ago. And the primary reason for that is just to have more face time with the teenagers. So they come in after school on Wednesday, about 3:30, and just work until teen night, which starts about 5:30 or 6. And they just get to hang out. And more importantly, we get to hang out with them and have conversations with them. Another component of our teenage ministry is during the summer, when we run those summer camps, we have what we call teen leader positions. And these are the teenagers that apply, they get interviewed, and then if they are chosen, and we hire about 30 of them, and we separate them between the 3 camps. You got Camp LOV, which is this one here. You have Camp Peace, which is over in Tolmanville at the Figure Center. And then you have the traveling team. And so they get paid a stipend. They get a lot of on-the-job training. They get, they have to come to our week of training and so forth. So anyway, it's just another component of that teenage ministry. And last year, because we used to go to Mexico for a mission trip, but now that the border is what it is right now, last year we took them to Camp Walkaway, where they could just kind of be campers and, go hiking and do archery and do all those camping things for a couple of days out in Mississippi. And as part of that, again, Bible study component, and we had a baptism service, which was just pretty awesome. And so again, the whole point with all these is to let them know that God loves them. A point that comes up to us from time to time is, is the neighborhood still dangerous? I just talked a second ago about the double homicide across the street from the ministry. And yeah, it is where we are. This is a graph of what we call the broken arrows. A broken arrow is when there's gunshots pretty close to the ministry, where we have to lock everything down, get everybody inside. And last year we had 48. About a year ago, this lady, her and the driver of the driver left, but the car was shot up around the corner with somebody armed with one of those Glock switches that I just talked to you about. And the car had multiple bullet holes in it. We weren't sure if she was wounded or not. When they drove up into our yard there and stopped, and the driver ran, but she was still in the car, and her pants were all kind of bloody, but it was all from the glass. She was not shot. Now, we didn't know it till we got her in the building to check her out, because even though we were walking her to the building, they were still shooting even then. So anyway, she was fine. This happened about 4 months ago. One of the young men that we've known since he was little, he got shot at the store down the street, and he ran to the ministry so he could get help. And Janelle was at the lighthouse, and so she did what she could with that bullet wound to his leg, and then called the police and 911 and so forth. And this happened, you can see the timestamp, about 2 weeks ago. About 4 weeks ago. There was a car chase from Mobile, actually, that ended right in front of our candle factory while our teenagers were doing candles. So that was pretty exciting. All of this to say that the neighborhood still is extremely turbulent. These are a couple of pictures from our cameras taken years ago now, but you get the point. Again, going back to the idea that rifles have not totally replaced handguns, but they're more prevalent. And do notice that all these are during the day. Remember the double homicide during the day. A lot of this is all during the day. But you see the camera capture these two photos, but why we're there is because of this picture here. Again, people live here, whether they live in Alabama Village or more populated is Gulf Village, the housing project, and kids will come and play on our playground or our basketball court. This is their home, and hearing gunshots is not uncommon for these kids all the time. And so, again, this is where God wants us. This is one of my favorite photos to explain it. We never pretend the violence doesn't happen. You have to look through that bullet. In fact, this is in our candle factory, our little portable where our candle factory is. There's 6 bullet holes in our candle factory. And let me say this real quick. No one's ever been hurt on our campus while we're there. Now, people have been killed on our campus, but not while we're there. And so even though these things happen, again, this is an interesting photo. It happens, but you look past that bullet hole and you see kids playing. So the two go hand in hand. But at the same time, I love this verse. You stay alert and clear-headed. 1 Thessalonians 5:6. Yes, we give God all the credit for being safe. We put it in his hands. At the same time, we are extremely careful and trained and alert. I mean, almost to an extreme. But I don't think you can be too extreme there. We have to be, we know where we are. We've gone to multiple courses now, and this is a course we went to 2 years ago in the desert of New Mexico near Albuquerque, where, again, combat veterans were training us on different things. Active shooter scenarios, how to survive one of those. Here's some tactical combat casualty care, better known as TCCC. And I like this little video clip. You'll see what they're doing there is putting on a tourniquet in a moving vehicle, which is exactly what we would have to do in the event that someone was ever hurt, to treat the wound but get them to the trauma center as fast as possible. Well, that training was so good, we brought Nick and his team to Alabama so he could look at our facility, give us some ideas, but also train our staff, all of our staff. So it was just great training. Again, we take that really seriously. And then 3 weeks ago, we went to another course. It's called Sheepdog Response, and it's run by Tim Kennedy, who puts them on all over the country. We went to Pensacola, Florida, and in this course, we learned more about, again, the TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. And this, awesome course where they put us through a variety of scenarios that were progressively harder and harder to help us develop our critical thinking skills. Again, want to learn as much as we can with the hopes that we'll never have to use them. To kind of put it in perspective, Malcolm Garcia, some of y'all may remember him, he's working on a book. His book is at the publisher now, and the editors and publishers are looking at his draft, and it's a full-length book, and it's up in New York, so they're taking a look at it to make probably some changes or additions or whatever they do, but it should be coming out within the next year, and he thinks it's going to be called The Village. And as you all may remember, he did come and live in the village at the lighthouse for almost a year in several pieces, in 3-month stays. What's interesting about Malcolm is he was a war correspondent in Afghanistan for years. And then after that, he came to Alabama Village. But I liked what he said. Again, working with us. And he says it requires moral seriousness and a deep faith to work in a neighborhood where gunshots are as common as the ruined houses that line its streets. Unlike a war, there is no logic to the violence in Alabama Village, no strategy being pursued. The LOV staff risk being injured or worse. It is inspiring to be among men and women who take such risks on behalf of those much less fortunate than themselves. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk in the most challenging of circumstances, offering faith, hope, and love each and every day to the people God has led them to serve. J. Malcolm Garcia. Yeah, great quote from him, from an outside observer who's been there, again, lived on the ground with us for almost a year in entirety. A great verse that always kind of keeps us going as well is Matthew 4:16. And for those who lived in the land where death cast its shadow, a light has shined. And that's exactly right, the light of Christ. As far as LOV as an organization, again, we have a board of directors. We are a certified nonprofit 501c3 organization in the state of Alabama. Here are our board members. Here's a picture of them, or most of them. There's a couple not there, but this is a pretty good picture of our board. Our financial position as we are today, a couple of things that we've always done. Number one, we're 100% debt free. We've never had any debt and still don't. We do have a credit card, but it's paid off each and every month. And even when we did our building, our $300,000 new building back 6 years ago, we didn't start until we had the money in the bank. Our management and general expense, based on our Form 990, which is our IRS form that we have to do each year, it's less than 5%. And that's because Dolores and I both voluntarily just take $20,000. The board has offered us more, but we don't want more. We want to leave that money for the other staff and investing in the ministry. How we survive is I would work at Volunteers of America as their volunteer coordinator and have since 2007. I'm able to do that off-site and online so that when kids are at the ministry, I'm there on site. I've also had the privilege of being a part-time instructor at Spring Hill College, teaching healthcare classes, management classes, and social entrepreneurship. Our donation breakdown, 81% of our donations come from individuals. 15% come from foundations, and 4%, and this is all based on last year's, come from churches. Still, and has always been the case, we take zero government money. And as we all know, as a Christ-centered nonprofit, government money usually or can come with strings attached. We don't need that. As far as our accountability, any money that comes through our door, donations, first and foremost, our treasurer is a retired FBI agent who used to investigate fraudulent nonprofits. We are still members of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, known as the ECFA. And our 990 forms are available on our website. So anytime you want to take a look, feel free to do so. Our 2023, the accountants are still actually working on that, but that should be up and running in the next week. The Pritchard water situation. For those of y'all who aren't totally up to speed on that, let me give you a brief history. The Pritchard Water and Sewerage Board is where we get our water. On February 22nd of 2022, law enforcement agents raided their offices there at the Pritchard Water Board. The day after, arrests were made. A variety of law enforcement agencies raided it, from the IRS to the Sheriff's Department to the FBI. About a year ago, exactly to the day, March 22nd, we were told, all the residents in Alabama Village were told we had 90 days before the water would be turned off. Well, that didn't happen. The case went to court, and on November 11th, 2023, Synovius Bank, which is the primary investment holder to Pritchard Water owes them $57 million. And the court ordered a receiver to take over all the operations. A receiver was appointed in November 11th. That's him. His name is John Young Jr. He's been doing this for over 20 years. He's been to Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, St. Louis, all kinds of places. In his own words, he's never seen a system dysfunctional than the one in Pritchard. And he's on camera saying that. Well, once he was appointed, we set up a meeting with him and we let him know our desires and our wishes. And basically what those are is to stay where we are, if at all possible. And if not, if we could drill our own water line, that would be great. But our wish is to stay there. However, after that meeting in January, in February 15th, 2024, about a month ago, there was another meeting where he openly announced that this idea of just shutting off the water to Alabama Village, which is what we were told a year ago, there's no legal course to do that. They cannot implement eminent domain in this situation. Okay, it's based on mismanagement and corruption. It's not based on a public good like an interstate coming through the neighborhood. And he said there is no legal avenue to just shut off the water. So that puts us in a holding pattern, but we're not waiting. He is going to have final recommendations in July that he will submit. So one question right off the bat, people say, well, does this reduce the number of students you're able to help? Well, no. Remember, all of our students are bussed in, are vanned in. We use our vans to bring them in. If you look at this map here, Light of the Village is in that little kind of pink or lighter colored pink heart. The only two families that we serve in Alabama Village are those other two hearts, and they're both teenagers. Let me highlight what we believe would be the impact area if they did indeed shut off the water to Alabama Village. It looks like that. And so, in all honesty, at the most is 2 households that we serve. And there are about another 38 households in Alabama Village that would be impacted. A lot of households would be impacted by that decision if it was ever done. But as far as our students go, it doesn't really impact us at all. However, we're not going to wait for them just to turn off the water. We immediately started to plan. So our strategy is 3-pronged. Number 1, as soon as we were told a year ago they were going to shut off the water in 90 days, we drilled a well. It's located at the lighthouse across the street. It's already ready to go. All we have to do is turn it on. And that would give us water to use if need be. Number 2, we talked to the receiver and people involved that we would be wanting, our desire would be to drill our own water line and tie it into a solid main water line, probably on Wilson Avenue, which is less than a quarter of a mile away. And we told them that we would be wanting to do that in the event that the water was ever shut off. And last but not least, if for some reason we're forced to move, well, okay, we move. And we've already talked to architects about that. Some drafts of plans have already been drawn up. So the bottom line is simple. Even if Alabama Village is gone, the light stays on. Again, the gospel is portable. We'll take it, and if we have to move, we move. And we'll, again, all the people that we currently serve, we pick them up and just take them to wherever we are. We hope that's not the case. If we can stay where we are in the building that we own, that would be great. So we'll just see what happens, but we are prepared for whatever happens. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about the Light of the Village team. And here they are. Just an amazing group of people. A couple of facts about them. The average length of employment is now 12 and a half years. And that's just phenomenal. I mean, that's a blessing to have that kind of consistency, that number of dedicated individuals to work in this environment. Again, you heard what Malcolm said about it. You've heard what we've said about it. They are so dedicated to their service to Christ. It's amazing. All of our staff have health insurance, retirement benefits, and they all have access to counseling services. So all of that is important to make sure that they are well taken care of. Our board is good with that, and we are as well. We want to make sure that this group, is as well taken care of as possible. Morgan has been with us since 2007. She has pretty much started each one of the camps that we currently have, and now she does the traveling team and works a lot with the one-on-one ministry. Now, Morgan's big event was last December. She was married. That's her husband, and Ross Copeland, and so now it's Morgan Carnley Copeland is her name. Elizabeth Davis, she runs Camp LOV. She has been with us for 10 years now. Janie Weidmeyer has been with us for 12 years. She's the one who runs Camp Peace. Angelisa Theodore, her and Morgan came almost at the same time. She volunteered for years, just off and on with us since 2009. And then she worked at Panera Bread. It closed down after COVID. And so she became full-time staff at that point. And she does pretty much anything that's available. Anything we ask her to do, she does it. And then, as already mentioned, Kristen Jordan, again, volunteered with us for many, many years. But here in this last year, she resigned her position in Mobile Public Schools and now works as our tutoring person. And just a phenomenal ministry that's become. We do have what we call the LOV support staff. You got Decino D's, Miss Betty, who does a lot of our cooking and runs the kitchen. You got Janelle, who stays at the lighthouse and does a lot of the housekeeping for us. Tony, who is Tony Mosley, who does all our yard work. He lives in the Alabama Village. And then even Ulysses is a teen leader who's taking college courses, but he's helping us right now as a part-time intern with our after-school program. And that last little blossom, I'd say, is the interns. People that have come for so many years. Since 2004, we've used college interns to come work with us for the summer. Some do it multiple summers, some just do it once. And we decided this year to send out a questionnaire to all of our college interns. And we got 75 back. And over 30 of them are in full-time ministry now. Another 20 are in some type of either education as a teacher or a social worker or that type of thing. But we just had some pretty amazing responses and comments about their time with Light of the Village. I picked a few, just 4 of them real quick. The first one says, I grew up in church, but my personal relationship with Christ wasn't established properly until my time with LOV. Working with the kids and teaching Bible lessons really motivated me to strengthen my relationship with Christ and become a better Christian. Number 2, Light of the Village helped me to grow closer to God and lean more on Him during difficult and good moments. 3, Light of the Village is what inspired me to want to become a social worker. Lastly, volunteering at Light of the Village was the best decision I made in college. I learned more about ministry and how to love people where they are at LOV than anywhere else I've served. So just a couple of interesting, comments from former interns. Lastly, I want to let everyone know that the PBS documentary From the Good Road about Alabama Village that followed the lives of Mayo, who sadly was killed at the beginning of it. There was his candlelight vigil where the gunshots were going off at the very beginning of that episode. And then, of course, you have DeCino and Jesse. It's now available on YouTube. So it's totally free. If anybody wants to see it, you can just Google Alabama Village or Light of the Village on YouTube and you can find it. It's a 28-minute story. And there's Jesse and DeCino from about a month ago. Jesse is still in school, still studying to be a civil engineer. And DeCino is actually engaged to be married in October. So, they're both doing very well. And lastly, our mission continues. We're not done. God willing, we're going to continue to do this as long as we are able. And going back to little Anthony's story, there are a lot of sheep out there that need help and guidance. But we do know that we work for the shepherd, and we will continue to do so as long as God sees fit. I appreciate everyone. Thank you for listening to this presentation. And thank you for all the support you've given us, both prayerfully, financially, voluntarily. It is a team effort. And if you're hearing this, you're part of that team. So thank you. God bless.